My name is Christian Basel. Years ago, I had an idea. I got myself a Tardis. Took it to new places, met a lot of new people, took some great pictures, and talked Doctor Who. From Krypton Radio and the creators of the Hangin web show, this is the legend of the traveling TARDIS. Join me on my latest adventures and become part of the legend. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Legend of the Traveling TARDIS radio show. My name is Christian Basel. We have a wonderful episode coming up for you, and I'll explain why in just a few moments. But first, let me introduce you to our friends here today who are part of the panel. I want to introduce my good friend, Dr. Freedom himself, Brian Burress. How you doing there, Brian?
Hanging in there. How about yourself, Christian?
I am surviving. Yes, I am very much surviving here. It's just been still crazy on this lockdown thing, and I don't want to say I'm being optimistic, but it seems like there's no end in sight for right now. I'm hearing May, and I'm hoping May is the deadline, but I'm truly optimistic, and probably in a way that I should not be out there, but I want May to be the day, May 1st. I was just like, because April just is like bleh. And we're recording in this is Easter weekend. So Easter was already shot. I went to my local grocery store, and already the candy for Easter is already 60 to 70% off. It's like already people knew that it was going to be a bust out there. So I'm feeling so bad about it. But there goes Easter for this year, for 2020 there. I want to also introduce my good friend, Dave. It's been a while since you've been back here, the rathole.ca.
Yes.
Chapman, how you doing there, Dave?
Not too bad. As you said, Easter up here in Canada, we snowed because, of course, you can't have a nice spring without snow.
Canada.
Yeah, things up here are shut down till at least end of June.
Oh, my goodness.
At least at a municipal level, most of our cities have said, nope, we will not even entertain the notion until the end of June, but are willing to relook at it later. But yeah, things aren't... I'm just hoping my entire summer is not shot.
Now, let me put it this, when you say shutdown, because I know shutdown is almost not universal in all places. I mean, California's shutdown is not as Florida's shutdown. What is shutdown in Canada and Alberta?
No playgrounds, any municipal buildings, gyms, rec centers, all of that's closed down. Government offices are down to bare minimum. Service Canada, that handles all of our employment insurance stuff, is down to basically just virtual, which is going crazy. All of our emergency benefits are run through that program. So they've been doing an amazing job getting that rolling. We can't book anything. So all of our Quidditch teams are done. We had nationals canceled. Universities are all shut down with the exception of some of the librarians, because all the homeschoolers need to get access to stuff like that. Public libraries are shut down. Basically, everything but essential services, everything but your grocery stores, your plumbers, your auto mechanics, stuff like that. And even those are heavily restricted.
Yeah, and especially here. Now, you mentioned libraries, and here in Florida is actually a kid's dream, meaning this. If you have a book and it's out, don't bring it back. And there are no late fees. They're like, nope, you can keep it for a while. Let's say, maybe April, May, June. So they've actually told people not only not to come to the library, but if you got a book or something checked out,
keep it.
No late fees. Yeah, we're not Blockbuster this week. So you're fine. So let me bring in also author Mackenzie Floor. I miss you, Melanie. I'm sorry.
Mel's right before the call, so he's associating me with Mel's.
Mackenzie Floor, the author of The Right of Wands. How you doing there, Mackenzie? How you holding up over there?
Oh, well, right now we're number 3 in the hotspot zone here, and just like Dave, we've got more restrictions that were handed to us this week in Michigan, so we're very similar to what Dave was talking about in Canada. We now are not allowed to travel anywhere at all unless it's an essential. We have restrictions on how many people can actually go into a grocery store. They have stopped selling all non-essential products. It's just crazy. They're saying May 1st, but to be honest, I don't think that is going to be good enough for Michigan because we have not hit peak yet, and right now it keeps going up and up and up and up, and it's just not slowing down. We've got people that just are ignorant and not following the rules, having parties, and it's just stupid.
I know. And apparently 6 feet is not 6 feet to everybody.
Yeah, no.
Speaking of 6 feet, because I'm a horrible segue, I want to introduce you to our good friend who I haven't seen in quite some time. And it's been quite a long time out in the UK. The man who would be script editor for the final series of the classic Who series for Sylvester McCoy, Mr. Andrew Cartmel. How you doing there, Andrew? How are you holding up in the UK?
I'm actually about 6'1", Christian.
So stay one Andrew away from people. Got it.
So what we're going to have to do is when we're in the UK, we have to lay you down so many people can say, okay, we have that little variance of that 0.1 down there. And, Andrew, how's it like how's life in the UK for you right now?
Well, the sun is shining, the cat's sleeping in the garden. If you're a freelance writer, being on lockdown isn't a hell of a lot different from work.
Okay. So are you an introvert? You're like, okay, well, this is a normal day for me right now.
I'm missing having friends around for dinner parties. Now that the garden's looking so beautiful in the gorgeous spring weather, I'm missing having friends around in the garden to be drinking wine. But as far as my workday is concerned, that's no different at all.
Good grief there. Now, you were the script editor for our friends who might have not been familiar with or have not watched Classic Who. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself for our new Whovians who are not familiar with the Classic series there?
I did the last 3 years of Classic series, which was the era of a guy called Sylvester McCoy, who was the 7th Doctor, and his companion, mostly his companion Ace for most of those episodes. And I mention her because we really did set the template for Who when it came back under Russell Davies. And if you look at Ace and some of the stories surrounding her, you'll very much see where Rose came from.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a conscious attempt to build on what we had done and what we'd got right. We didn't get everything right, but we got a lot right. And we took a very modern and different approach to Doctor Who in contrast with what had gone before. And that was the kind of approach that Russell and Stephen would then follow.
Gotcha there. Now, going back to series 26, because Sylvester went through a metamorphosis during his time. He was kind of the clown doctor, and then he became mystery doctor. When did that evolution kind of start off in there?
It's just a case of us finding our feet. Sylvester's tremendously gifted stage clown, so it wasn't surprising that he played to that strength when he was just getting started in the role. And we were just discovering, we all hit the ground running on that series. We joined very quickly. The show was made very quickly. There was little prep time. But by the time we'd done our first series together, season 24, we'd kind of begun to get a feel for what was needed. And what was needed was more gravitas for the Doctor, more mystery, and more of a sense of him being a powerful entity with agency. Whereas in previous series, he had become a bit of a chump and a fall guy.
Gotcha. Now, Ace has been an integral part of what we discussed earlier. For about Rose, because Ace had a big role to play when it came to Dragonfire, when it came to Ghostlight, when it came to the Curse of the Fenric. She had there's the Doctor Who timeline, which we're kind of used to, which had the companions, them going in there, being part of an adventure, and then the adventure's over. And only a few times where they've kind of expounded on this, which is the War Games, Trial of the Time Lord, and the Key to Time, where they kind of put into multi, but never another layer on top where there was a running arc for the companion. And whose idea was that? To bring up that influence in in the final series?
Well, I was the script editor, which was, in those days, was more like a showrunner than what a script editor is today. So that would all have come from me, but it would have come from me in collaboration with some of the most gifted writers of our time, people like Ben Aronovich, Rona Munro, Ian Briggs, Mark Platt, marvelous writer. And there was really two reasons for taking that approach to Ace. One was I wanted to avoid the cliche, all the cliches that the show had fallen into. I once wrote a flowchart of what the classic Doctor Who story was, which was the TARDIS lands on the planet, the Doctor and one or more companions comes out, you separate them, you bring them back together, they can't get back to the TARDIS, and you repeat as necessary. And that was very kind of dull. And so I laid down, especially because a lot of writers, not my writers, but writers who had either worked on the show before or who had seen the show before, had fallen into this very lazy trope of doing exactly what I said. They would separate the Doctor and the companion, have little parallel storylines where they're trying to find each other, then they bring them back together, just kind of generating story coupons, and in a very dull way, plot coupons. So what I said was, one of my ground rules was never separate the Doctor and the companion. So you can no longer do this lazy plot device of generating a little bit of story by taking them apart. Now, once you've got the two of them together, you then are forced to sort of develop a chemistry between the two. They have to interact, or at least act together more. And you then begin to think, well, who is the companion? And you could try and deepen the character of the Doctor, but as far as I was concerned, that was completely forbidden, because the whole deal with the Doctor, as far as I'm concerned, is that the Doctor should remain a mystery, a complete enigma, because that's where the show's title came from. That was the unique selling point of the show back in 1963. We don't know who the Doctor is, so you can't develop or deepen the Doctor or give him more of a backstory. Although some people have in the past, I've never really approved of that. So we didn't do that. So that left us with a companion, and luckily, we had the great good fortune to have Sophie Aldred join as the new companion in a role that had been developed for her. I won't say created, because I created the character of Ace, but it had been developed, including coming up with a name, by the brilliant Ian Briggs, who had really given us a three-dimensional character for the companion. And that's, you were lucky to have two dimensions to the average Doctor companion. So this was fabulous stuff. So we had wonderful Sophie, this good character. We had her working with the Doctor. We had all these great writers. So you can begin to see how an arc would kind of become inevitable. Because they couldn't develop an arc for the Doctor, because I didn't want backstory for the Doctor, with one exception that we'll get to in a minute. I didn't want any kind of continuity for the Doctor, so that really left Ace. So it was only natural that the writers began to develop, expand that character, and to give her more of a life story.
Gotcha there. Well, Andrew, we're actually on a hard break right now. When we return, we're going to continue our discussion with Andrew Cartmel, script editor for classic series Doctor Who. When we return, please continue to stay logged on, tune in, and continue to become part of the legend.
It's Germany, 1938. Charlotte is a 15-year-old girl living in the Jewish quarter. George lives in the city proper, and enamored by Charlotte's charm and grace when she wanders into his cobbler shop, George decides right then and there that he is going to marry her. Follow along as this unlikely couple struggles to stay one step ahead of the Gestapo and their dramatic escape from Nazi Germany. Good Things Always Happen in Springtime, from author Joanne Fisher, on Amazon.com today.
Alien invaders enslave Earth,
Unleashing hunters into the ruin wastes.
One young survivor struggles to elude their monsters, clinging to hope.
When he's stolen off the planet by a sarcastic starship AI, they pit their uneasy alliance against a treacherous galaxy.
Explore a whole new verse of barbarism and betrayal.
Wonder and adventure.
In the Scion series
by Michael J. Allen.
Beginning with Book 1, Scion Conquered Earth.
Available in print, ebook, and audio on Amazon.com.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Legend of the Traveling Tardis radio show. My name is Christian Basel. Now, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button down below and hit that notification bell, because we want to make sure that you continue to get content. And if you're not doing that, you're not getting our stuff. So make sure that you're hitting subscribe and the notification bell down at the bottom. Also, if you're listening to this on iHeart, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. I'll never get used to it. Radio.com. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast channel so that you can get more content. We're trying to put this out on a weekly basis, and we will have tons of content coming up throughout pretty much the spring, and in some cases throughout the summer too there. We are here with Andrew Cartmel, the script editor for classic series Doctor Who, and Sylvester McCoy there. We're joined by Dave Chapman from therathole.ca. We're also joined by author Mackenzie Floor and Dr. Freedom himself, Brian Burress. Now, Andrew, before we begin, and I just want to lay out the groundwork for people who may not be familiar with that, and I know Dave has a question for you. Can you explain to people who, in layman terms, what the Cartmel Master Plan was and how it was executed?
Well, I do like to say that the Cartmel Master Plan was to get the scripts in on time.
That, yeah, that makes sense.
But there was more to it than that. As I mentioned earlier, in recent years, when I joined the show, the Doctor had become almost like a guest character in his own show. He'd become inconsequential. He'd become a victim rather than the sort of powerful figure at the center of the show. And also, over the previous decades, more and more become known about him. He was supposed to be this complete enigma, but gradually that mystery had been chipped away at. It started with, as soon as you discover that he's a Time Lord, then there's other Time Lords, and he's not even like the boss Time Lord. And it went, and he could be disciplined by the Time Lords, and he could be exiled to Earth, and all this stuff. And there were always good, solid story reasons to do those things. By which I mean they would provide you with a couple of weeks more material for your stories, but they had long-term detrimental effects, because the more you did that, the less interesting the Doctor became. The more it's like he shrank with every iteration of that. He became less and less of a formidable figure. I say he and him because up to that point it had been a male Doctor. Okay. So I realized that the thing I needed to do to make the Doctor really powerful again and interesting was to give him back some mystery. And I always emphasize, people often ask, well, you see, I didn't want to deny all the previous material that had come along, all that canonical material. I wanted to say all that's true, but there's something else that's true. So the idea was that the Doctor was all of those things, but in fact he had a secret, and that he was not just a Time Lord. He was some kind of potent pre-Time Lord figure who was passing as a Time Lord. And people ask, what exactly did I want him to be? And the answer is, well, of course, I didn't have an exact answer for that, because as soon as you have another exact answer, you've brought him down to earth again, and you've removed the mystery, you've removed the question mark in the title. So the idea was just to say, this is what he isn't. He is something greater and more mysterious and prior to that, but not to specify it, because as soon as you specify it, the air goes out of the balloon again, if you see what I mean.
No, that's fine. I think sometime when we were talking in another media, we had we had talked about, and he said there's a reason why he's called Doctor Who, and once you remove the Who part, the show's over. What's the point? If you give too much of the characterization away, he has to be an enigma. He has to be mysterious. He has to be unknown. And what I appreciated about, especially the final series, when it came to Fenric and Battlefield. And sorry, my brain's kind of fried over here.
Ghostlight, we might.
Ghostlight, yeah.
The Wonderful Survival by Rona Munro. What great scripts they were, and very well directed, those two, particularly.
But it seemed like the baddies had upped their game. We weren't talking about Daleks and Cybermen, and they were more godlike. Greatest show in the galaxy. They were more in a realm that I think the Doctor should have been fighting. Oh, okay, well, the Doctor has already fought the Cybermen and the Daleks and the Centaurans and all that. But here's something. I'm trying to think of the name. Pyramids of Mars. Somebody help me out. Go ahead, Brian.
You're thinking about Sutek the Destroyer.
Sutek, yeah. Where the baddies could have just, I kill you now, Doctor, but didn't, because they had a fear of the Doctor already. And especially in Curse of the Fenric, which I've seen quite a few times, the chess game. I thought that was a brilliant technique, where they had to play this simple game, but the game really was on a larger scale. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble on, but go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Well, no, the thing is, when you hear that they're slightly afraid of him, then you get this little tingle in your spine, and that's the whole thing we're aspiring to, is that slightly spine tingling, slightly hair raising sense of wonder about the Doctor, like, who is this guy or this gal, who, and you want that bit of goose flesh. And as soon as the goose flesh is gone, your goose is cooked.
Right, exactly. There, Dave, you had a question for Andrew. Go for it.
I'm going to rephrase it a little bit because we talked about it a little during the break. So Sophie Aldred, Ace, has kind of been coming back. She came back as part of a commercial, basically, for the new DVDs with Ace Now. And then that has spun off into her new book, At Childhood's End, which you mentioned you hadn't read yet. But how do you feel about something like that with characters from the old Who growing, specifically the companions, growing into really their own adventures, even though, the Doctor's there, but it really isn't a Doctor story?
Well, it's like the Sarah Jane Adventures, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that is a good.
I think that our era would lend itself to that. And I also think that all of the surviving writers from our era should be given gigs, because they're fantastic writers. And they're not, those who aren't too busy doing other projects. Somebody should snap up Ian Briggs for a start. I mean, Mark Platt has written tons of stuff for Big Finish, all of it very good. And some of it, like, absolutely astonishing. But somebody should get him writing for television. And Rona Munro, she did, Stephen Moffat, to his eternal credit, did hire her to do The Eaters of Light. But she's really the only one from the classic series, certainly from my era, who's been, that anybody's made use of. So I'd love to see those writers back in the game.
Now, I know you did an interview, or you had spoken to Rona Munro earlier, because she did, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when we had talked, she didn't even want anything to do with Doctor Who. I'm curious how Stephen Moffat brought her back to do one episode.
I don't think it was a case of her not wanting to have anything to do with Who. I think she was just not part of the fan circuit and really didn't know what to make of it. Also, she was writing feature films and major stage plays. So, and I think she sort of felt that she had moved on. But then Who came back big time, and suddenly it was fashionable again, and people were taking an interest in the classic series, which is good.
And one of the things here's the thing that really just kind of irks me on that particular season of Capaldi, of that particular series of Capaldi, because her episode, according to the ratings and such, were not the highest ones. That is one of my favorite episodes of that series, because I personally, and I made it very clear when I was doing my talk about it, that Rona tapped in what made classic Who great and threw it into new Who. Now, I know that's not parroted to everybody else who watched it, and I know a lot of my friends were like, "Yeah, it was my favorite." I sat there and go, you know what? She wrote a great episode, and I think she also was the antithesis of why classic Who can work in new Who if you bring back those writers. There was one of the criticisms I had with Chibnall. He was just, I'm not going to have anything to do with anything of the old stuff. It's going to be brand new writers, brand new musician, brand new everything. And I was like, you need a Rona Munro. You need a Ben. You need all these guys to come back and kind of finish what they started. And I think they need to bring you back too. But that's just my opinion on that.
Well, speaking of Rona, if any of your listeners haven't seen Survival, and if they can manage to forgive the terrible creature prosthetics, which are laughably bad, but if you can set that aside, you'll find an amazing, compelling, hilarious, terrifying, and poetic story with a wonderful, wonderful subtext about sexuality and about the roots of violence and warfare. Right. It's just, and it's sheer poetry because it's written by a brilliant writer, Rona Munro. Yes. So do check that out. Do forgive the very sketchy cats in it, but apart from that, I think it's wonderful. I really do.
Well, I think that was the only thing that was kind of holding down, because the writing for that series was brilliant all along. I think the special effects could not do justification for what the stories were bringing up. I even liked Happiness Patrol. I would love to see the Candyman back in CGI. That's just me. I know Brian is shaking his head.
It was a very good costume. It worked extremely well.
Yeah.
And the Destroyer in Battlefield was great. And sometimes you would get great work by the effects and costumes department, but sometimes you wouldn't, and you never knew what way it was going to be.
Gotcha. Mackenzie, did you have a question for Andrew? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yes, you're all right. So since we were talking at the beginning of the show, you know that in this case that you haven't watched any of the newest Who, so it's kind of hard to really try to word this question that I have is...
If you just assume total ignorance on my part, Mackenzie, you won't be far wrong.
Okay. So that would work there. So without going into too much in spoilery, I kind of like to look at it. They took your theory and put it on steroids. Is what Chibnall did. They have made it so that the Doctor now is not actually from Gallifrey. It's from some unknown planet, and the Time Lords are really not the Time Lords. That they were actually using his or her DNA to get the regeneration. So I would probably say at this point, a question would be: is if you were coming back right now, what would, based on that little knowledge, how would you take what you had planned and implement it into the show now?
Well, if I was to return to the show with any autonomy as a writer, the first thing I would do is get rid of that fucking sonic screwdriver. I got to tell you, Can I say fucking? I just said it again. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I'll let the team know to edit it out. So they're fine. Yeah, we do have the preteen crowd in there, so it's fine. It's okay. We'll say it. You said it twice, so yeah. Go ahead, Andrew. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, that would be my first order of business. And rather than delve into any, you see, I think as soon as we delve into the minutiae, into the fine detail of what Chibnall's done, Chibnall's obviously done a reset on it, which is great. But as soon as you start to specify that reset, you're back in the same old problem that you're explaining too much. You just want to say what you thought. You thought you knew what was going on. You didn't. It's much more than that, and kind of leave it there, I would have said. Other people have very different approaches. I mean, Russell wrapped the Doctor in relationships, which I was with the great script editor Terence Dix on that, the no snogging in the TARDIS rule.
Hang on, Andrew. We're on a hard break, but when we return, we're going to continue with that answer in just a few moments. When we return, please stay logged on, stay tuned in, and become part of the legend.
Now on Amazon.com, iCoin from author Jeremy Mosby. It's an alternate reality, and the leader of the planet iCoin is none other than Benjamin Franklin. When corrupt officials threaten not only iCoin but the Earth as well, an unlikely chosen one, Jeremy, must face dark foes to save the Earth and iCoin alike. Author Jeremy Mosby takes readers on a superhero's adventure through this compelling and imaginative alternate universe. Get iCoin on Amazon.com today.
Jackie Sonnenberg's My Soul to Keep is a ghost story rooted in the realities of actual cults. When 13-year-old Sky Monroe arrives at her new boarding school, all she can think about is death and connecting with the afterlife. Soon she discovers her school's spirituality group, the Guardians of Light, and they have a secret. They can speak with the dead, and the organization is a cult. But this isn't Sky's only problem. The campus house where Sky resides is haunted, and even the ghosts have an agenda. They intend on getting the souls they want. Filled with mystery and intrigue plucked straight from the headlines, author Jackie Sonnenberg's research and attention to detail give this ghost story an even more eerie atmosphere. Find My Soul to Keep on Amazon.com today.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Legend of the Traveling TARDIS. My name is Christian. I am the host of this show. With us today on this wonderful panel is the RatHole.ca's Dave Chapman. We also have author Mackenzie Floor of The Right of Wands. We have Dr. Freedom. Please make sure that you are subscribing to Dr. Freedom on the YouTube channel. Whenever news drops, he's on top of it, and he's giving his opinion, and he does not hold back. That's what we love about Brian out there, though. Andrew, I'm sorry. I had to cut you off because of commercial break. Could you elaborate more about what you were discussing there about Doctor Who and what Chris Chibnall had done and what you would have done right now if you were sitting in the seat? Let me elaborate on things because, Mackenzie, what we know about what has happened in The Timeless Child, we know that there have been more regenerations.
Yeah.
Before the first Doctor, which kind of threw everybody into it, or at least half the Who universe into a tizzy. Let me get that corrected. Apparently, the Time Lords, or at least the person that was helping her, and Brian, help me out. What was the name of that woman? Do you remember offhand?
Or are we talking about the figure in history?
Not Rassilon, but the person who found the Timeless Child.
Oh, Tecteun.
Tecteun was, I hate to say this, but yeah, kind of a child abuser because she just kept on regenerating the child. So the Doctor has more than regenerations pre-Cartmel. We don't even know if the child's a Time Lord. The whole society was based upon the Doctor bringing his influence, I guess, her DNA, and started the Time Lord Society. And even Rassilon and Omega are not even mentioned in this as of yet. I just want to make you aware of what is going on right now in this and why kind of the universe is kind of split on this, half and half. Some people like it. They think it brings a new approach. They think it's refreshing. Some people are like, what the heck are you doing? You're giving way too much info. This info should not even be part of the schematics and kind of just takes Time Lord lore and throw it in the garbage can. Having known what this is about now and having known about the Cartmel master plan, does it sound like Chibnall's taking in the right direction, or do you have misgivings about what's going on?
Well, it's too detailed. All I wanted to do was throw the Doctor back into shadow again and just give hints of what was going on. And it sounds like there's a lot of detail and specifics, which is the last thing you want, because you just, I mean, number one, it depletes the mystery. And number two, that was the chief failing of the Moffat era. Moffat's an incredibly good writer, in some ways the great Doctor Who writer, but he would always get hung up on all these tiny little details of the mythos, of the mythology, and you just didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, I had a guy around here doing some carpentry in the house, and he mentioned that he had seen Doctor Who. He'd watched an episode, this is a few years back, and he said he didn't know what the hell was going on. He just tuned in, and that was the thing. If you'd been a devoted fan and had been following every little detail, you probably would have kept track. But to my mind, Doctor Who has to be the kind of show where you can just come in and not have seen it for the last couple of years and watch an episode and enjoy it. So when you get too hooked on detailing the mythology, the snake is kind of swallowing its tail. And it sounds, I can't say for sure, but it sounds like Chris is somewhat making the same mistake that Steve did.
Gotcha. Now, the thing is, and this is the analogy that I use, and this is where I think, where I give you homage to the Doctor that I love with Sylvester in his final years, is that if the Doctor were playing a game of poker, he would have a 2-7 offsuit, put the cards on the table, all the cards will be flipped over, and he says he has a royal flush, and everybody in that room would be convinced.
Yeah, that's
because everybody would be in the room like, how do you have that? That's the kind of thing that I've seen your interpretation of the Doctor as far as the evolution, and I loved it, and I wish it had more time there. Had seasons 27 and 28 and so on go on, first of all, would you have stayed with the series? And second of all, which direction would you have taken Sylvester McCoy's Doctor? Or would you have said, you know what, I think we're done with Sylvester, let's get a new guy?
No, I would have certainly done another season. We would have kept Sylvester and we would have refreshed the companion. That's what we would have done. And we wouldn't really have changed the Doctor because we'd just got the Doctor to the point where I wanted him, where I thought he should be. He was back. He was the hero figure in his own show. He was powerful, resourceful, and nobody knew who the hell he was. So that You know, I've always said that the Doctor is basically the Lone Ranger. He rides into town. There's something bad going on. He sorts it out, and he rides off again. And everybody says, "Who was that masked man?" Nobody really knows who he was. So that's in a nutshell. That's the Doctor Who story, the ideal Doctor Who story.
Brian, looks like you have a question over there.
No, I just wanted to remark because what happened in the current series, a lot of people flashed back to episodes like Brain and Morbius and all that. I flashed back to Silver Nemesis, where you had Lady Penfort confronting the Doctor about claiming she knew about things in his past and who he truly was, and that he was more than a Time Lord. And I was like, wow, it's kind of weird how that all kind of fits now. Or what I also loved about that era was the subtle little hints that were dropped here and there, just lines that were out of nowhere. Like in, I believe it was Remembrance of the Daleks, I believe it was, where they're going on about the Hand of Omega, and then the Doctor suddenly pops up and goes, yeah, something along the lines of, we had that same problem. We were trying to develop ours in the lab or something along that line. And I was like, wow, that just threw me. And then when they threw this new bit into the new series, it just really tied that all together. It gets like, wow, okay, so there's more to the Doctor. And that's what I loved about your ear, is what I wanted to say, is you just brought that mystery back in such a big way.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's nice to know that it actually landed, as you say. But what I want to emphasize is the fact that I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to make the Doctor shadowy, mysterious, powerful, and, as I said, previous to anything that we had already known. But when I set out to do that, I spoke to somebody who knew a lot more about the Doctor Who canon than I did, and that was Mark Platt, who was steeped in the history of the show and the lore of the show, and Ben Aronovich to some extent too. They were the two brains that I sort of said, okay, boys, this is what I want to achieve. How can we achieve it using the existing mythology and legends of the show?
Talk a little bit about, I think it was the detective vinyls.
Could it be the Vinyl Detective?
Because I'm having an analogy. Yeah, it's been a while since I've revisited that, but please talk about the... Yes.
Okay, since I left Doctor Who, I've been doing loads of stuff, but most interestingly, I've been doing a series of crime novels called The Vinyl Detective.
And I'm sorry I got it backwards.
And there's 5 books in the series, and if you would like to check them out, borrow them from the library. They're fun. They contain cats. You might have heard a cat in the background there, so warning, may contain cats. And they're kind of cozy crime thrillers. They're mystery thrillers, and they're very suspenseful, and they're very amusing. And you can just, in fact, one of them is going to be I'm just looking this up.
Sure.
One of them is about to be promoted on April the 17th, and it's going to be, what do they call that? They call it, is going to be Audible's Daily Deal. Yep. The audiobook of Flip Back, which is the 4th book in the series, will be available on 17th of April. So you'll be able to you can get a very inexpensive taste of what it's like to enjoy a vinyl detective mystery. So you folks out there may like to give it a go.
How would you describe the vinyl detective to people?
Well, I would say it's like the Maltese Falcon, but with rare records instead of a statuette of a falcon.
I'm sold.
I think you just got your first prospect over there.
It's also like The Thin Man, to evoke another classic crime story by Dashiell Hammett, because although in the first book the detective's a loner, from that point on he becomes part of a team with his girlfriend. So it's a bit like the Nick and Nora husband and wife detective team, classic detective team. So funny mysteries full of thrills, suspense, cats and vinyl, all the good things in life. What's not to like?
Exactly. Now, let me go back a little bit there, because I think I've asked this before, but I've kind of forgotten over time. How did you get the gig? How did you become a script editor? How did that?
Doctor Who. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I always wanted to be a novelist. I never really wanted to be a TV writer, but I thought in my innocence that it would be an easy way to support myself while writing novels. The reason that's funny is because it's probably as hard, if not harder, to break into television as it is to sell a novel. But in my blissful innocence, I got hold of a book called Writing for Television by a guy called Malcolm Hulke. The reason that's interesting is he was one of the major writers in the golden age of vintage Doctor Who. And it was full of practical advice about how to write TV scripts. I wrote a bunch of TV scripts long story short, I did sell a couple. I got them optioned, and then I got an agent, and then my agent got me the gig on Doctor Who. There you go. It wasn't too painful.
Now, you did go into the master plan with Lungbarrow, and
Yeah,
that seems to be a lot of people love Lungbarrow. Can you tell us a little bit about that for people who've never read the book?
Earlier, who's one of the finest writers I worked with, and he had the additional benefit that he was deeply involved with the Doctor Who lore. He was a dyed-in-the-wool fan, and you can have great writers who are Doctor Who fans, and you can have great writers who've never seen the show before. You just have to sort of give them a flavor of what they need to do and show them some episodes. But in the case of Mark, he had seen all the episodes. So when we sat down to develop a story, we came up with a story that was way too complex and too lacking in external drama to be a good TV show. So we set that aside, and Mark eventually turned that into the novel Lungbarrow and took another run at it, and we came up with Ghostlight, which was much more suited to being a television drama. And it also benefited from the tropes of the classic haunted house story, although what is going on is not a ghost in any real sense. It does give the viewers something to hang on to when they're being drawn into this very strange and very wonderful and very funny world that he created. It's almost like an Alice in Wonderland kind of Victorian world.
Okay.
I love that story. I think it's a classic.
I love it too. I think when I first saw Ghostlight, I was a little bit younger, and it kind of confused me. By the way, I know this is kind of a weird thing, but I guess the girl who played the actress, the actress who played the girl in there was actually, I've seen her before. Yeah, you can laugh at me, Dave. I'm having one of those weird moments today. The actress played in The Diary of Anne Frank, and that's how I knew the actress. And then she ended up in Ghostlight, and I watched her, and I was like, oh, wow, you got her too, huh? That's great. So
we always had fantastic casts, and that was the producer John Nathan Turner, whose chief pleasure in life was casting the cream of not just British actors, but actors from all over the world. We had people like Dolores Gray and Stubby Kaye. If anybody out there is a fan of the Broadway musical, I didn't know who the hell they were, but it turns out they were gods in that world.
Well, folks, we're up and against a hard commercial break when we return to the final segment of The Legend of the Traveling Tardis for this episode with script editor and writer Andrew Cartmel. When we return, we're going to finish up. Please continue to stay logged on, tune in, and become part of the legend.
Deborah Parmley's Jenna's Christmas Wish.
Santa, if there's one thing I want for Christmas more than anything, it's someone to spend Christmas with. Someone who really wants me to be there.
Head to the mountains of East Tennessee with romance author Jenna Hart for a Christmas writer's workshop. Since her mother passed after a long illness, Jenna has had one wish. She doesn't want to spend Christmas alone. Meeting Niccolo Maldini, cover model and actor, could make more than Jenna's Christmas wish come true. Unless Ember, Niccolo's ex-girlfriend, does something crazy to stop them from being together. It's a mountain Christmas romance you won't want to miss in Deborah Parmley's Jenna's Christmas Wish. Now on Amazon.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final segment of The Legend of the Traveling Tardis for this episode. My name is Christian Basel. We're continuing and wrapping up our interview with script editor of Classic Who, Andrew Cartmel. I'm here with Mackenzie Floor, Arthur Mackenzie Floor. I'm here with TheRatHole.ca's Dave Chapman, and I am with Dr. Freedom himself, Brian Burress. Again, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to your favorite podcast. Lock us in there so you can get more content as we put it out every week. And if you're on the YouTube channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, both for us and Dr. Freedom and the HWWS family of social media, because you will have tons and tons of content. If you like if you like Saturday morning cartoons, I told you it's one of these days. If you like Saturday morning cartoons, you can be there with Mark B. Lee. If you like tourism with the Orlando Wizard, where when we're out of this little situation. He'll be, I'm sure, he'll be touring again Orlando and all the entertainment venues out there, Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, everybody out there on the International Drive. Definitely want to check out the HWWS Media family and lock us in, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We're returning with Andrew Cartmel for our interview. And Andrew, we were at a convention one point, and I had a great time because I won't say the name of the convention, but I remember somebody coming up to me and saying,
who?
What's that? Yeah, that one. Somebody came up to me and said, Andrew wants to speak with you. I'm just like, okay. And I came up, and I think we had already met beforehand. We already had a discussion before you had arrived at the convention, and you wanted to take a tour of International Drive. You weren't familiar with the area. And what I remember best about it is I took you to the Florida Mall, and I had the Traveling Tardis. There's actually a whole album of Andrew with the Traveling Tardis going around town, touring around Orlando, and you had a grocery list from friends in the UK, if you remember that.
Yep. Candies for the woman who looks after my cat, booze for my brother who's hopelessly addicted to booze, vinyl, secondhand records, because I'm hopelessly addicted to vinyl. So that probably would have been, your work would have been cut out for you, my friend. I know. I apologize.
No, it was fun.
Probably still haven't recovered.
No, I had a great time. For those of you who may have not, and there is actually an album of this. I took Andrew to the Florida Mall. I took Andrew to Walmart, and I'm just geeking out because he's just walking around, and I was on full geek out because here's Andrew Cartmel walking around in a place where I go occasionally to get food, to get stuff, and here he is going around town. But my favorite part, you mentioned that you were 6'1", was that these two nice little short ladies were grabbing something on the top row at the Walmart, and they couldn't reach it, and you actually helped them out there. That was my recommend. I don't know if you remember that there.
Oh, I just did that so I look like a nice guy, so you could notice that. But I think it was on that occasion, but it was definitely in a Florida mall when I saw a store called Hot Topic, which I'm sure you'll know, and I saw that in Hot Topic they had TARDIS dresses. And at that point, no, I tell a lie, they were Dalek dresses. Yeah. And at that point, I knew that Doctor Who had suddenly gone over into the mainstream. I thought, at this point, it's no longer a niche or cult thing anymore.
I know. It kind of just grew up eventually. It kind of just grew on its own.
Well, it was David Tennant. I think David Tennant, when BBC America had the David Tennant content, I think that was what flipped it into the mainstream.
Is there something that you've done in the past that you're mostly proud of, as far as writing is concerned, as far as maybe even Doctor Who's concerned? There's something that just sticks out and says, this is, when they look back at me, this is what I want them to remember.
Well, I'm most proud of the Vinyl Detective novels, which I'm working on now. But prior to that, I was very pleased with Script Doctor, which was my memoir about working on the show, because I'd actually kept diaries at that time. And I found that I could reconstruct what had happened, including things that people had actually said that I jotted down. And I came up with a very funny, somewhat profane, extremely accurate picture of what it was like making a TV show at that time. And that TV show was Doctor Who. So anybody who's interested in classic Who, there is nothing else like that book. And I say that with no false modesty, because nobody else had bothered to record what was going on. And so I'm delighted that I had these diaries to draw on, and I'm very proud of that book. But I do like to dwell on my my life after Doctor Who and my writing since then. Mm-hmm. So the Vinyl Detective, also I've been writing stage plays. I had a play scheduled to go on in the West End of London in June. It may not be entirely surprising for you to hear that that's been postponed. Perhaps it'll be September, but who knows, because of the crazy hijinks that's going on at the moment.
Aside from being with other people and going out, what's the one thing you miss about being in quarantine right now that you just? When was the exact moment that you knew we were in quarantine? When this was a reality, and what do you miss most about being able to go out and do stuff? What's the one thing?
Spring, and we've had a week of really great weather. And my garden, which is a very nice garden, has just emerged from its kind of winter skeletal phase, and all the blossom is bursting out. It looks fantastic. And I've been sitting out there with the cat, but I want to be sitting out there with all my friends with a glass of very good wine in each of our little hands. And that is really what hit home to me, is that I'd love to do that. And at the moment, I just can't do that.
I know. And that's one of the hardest things for me. I'm a hugger. I touch my face. I wipe my eyes. I will probably be the reason why we will have to wait until December before we can go back outside again, because I miss the people at the convention. You had a good time at that convention, right? Did you?
Well, I loved all the cons that I did in the States, and I'm sorry that there weren't more of them. I particularly miss Regen in Baltimore, which was my #1 favorite. I think that one's gone for good now, and it's a pity a lot of them have bitten the dust, and such nice people were involved. And I saw so many fantastic parts of the States. So, but I think that they will come again, and maybe I will be invited again. So let's look on the bright side.
I think that'd be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. A question that I have too, that's a little bit off of the conventions, when you had mentioned about with your script writing, were you a fan of Doctor Who prior to becoming the script editor?
No, I knew the show, and when I say I wasn't a fan, I didn't, I was down on it. I just had never followed it. I'd watched some episodes when I was a really tiny kid. I'd seen some real great classics, which had always lived on in my mind, like the first Dalek story. And I'd owned some of the annuals when I was a kid. So I was, anybody of that generation was familiar with Doctor Who in the same way you'd be familiar with the Beatles or James Bond. It was just part of the cultural landscape. So I knew all about it, but I hadn't been following it. So I came to it perhaps with just the right amount of knowledge and love.
Gotcha. Well, Andrew, we're running. We've got a few minutes over here. Let me go ahead and run some convention news that we're going out there. Again, for all of our friends out there, this is subject to change without notice. And with the current situation out there, they always subject to change. Please make sure that you're keeping up with the Facebook page, The Legend of the Traveling Tardis radio show, a Doctor Who radio show. We do have, and let me just address that these show times and these dates can always change. Subject to change without notice. We'll keep you noticed when we get them. The Traveling TARDIS will return to MegaCon Orlando June 4th to the 7th at the Orange County Convention Center. Right now, it's being used to test coronavirus at this moment through the drive-through. So we're hoping that they will meet it. And so far, from what we understand, Christopher Eccleston will be there. So we're hoping that that will be the case over there. The following week will be Kaiser SuperCon with the Traveling TARDIS with special guest Cookie Dough Cosplay, Victoria Padilla, who does her own stuff, and she will be helping us out with panels at that convention as well. July 3rd, the July 4th weekend, crazy. The Traveling TARDIS will return to Florida SuperCon. We'll be hosting panels, and we will be in the media room, I think, if that's what they call it. So please come and visit us out there when we arrive there in Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center. Kaiser SuperCon is going to be at Kaiser College, located off of Lake Underhill and Cimarron Boulevard. We also have the Traveling TARDIS the following weekend returning to Tampa Bay Comic-Con to also do panels out there in the Tampa Bay Convention Center. And finally, Con Castorberus, one of the few remaining Doctor Who cons out there in this area, will be returning. They moved their date as well, October 10th to the 11th at the Holiday Inn Huntsville on Research Parkway. So please, if you get a chance, those events are on the Facebook page. And if you have any, if anything changes, we will let you know firsthand on the events page. So just keep in touch with that. Also, please check out the legendofthetravelingtardis.com. It is up and running, and we'll be keeping updates with news, reviews, and interviews up there as well as our YouTube channel has just made it up on the page there. So we've got a lot of content going on while you're being, for a better term, what Simon Fisher-Becker says is under house arrest or being sequestered or being quarantined or whatever. Again, hashtag please stay safe. Please stay home. We will get through this, and I will make sure I give everybody a hug when we get out there from 6 feet away. Mm-hmm. Virtually, I hope I am there. Andrew, do you have anything coming up as far as any projects, works, books that will be coming up very shortly?
Yes, on August the 5th, the fifth final detective novel, which is called Low Action, will be published. As I mentioned earlier, the Audible is making one of the earlier books, Flipback, Book of the Day, on April the 17th, so they're doing a big push on that. So please check out the either the print books or the audio books and just give them a try and see if you like them.
And Andrew, but when we put out this episode, make sure to send me the links. We'll make sure that the links are part of this episode when people download the episode and pull it up on their apps. The links will be attached to there. Andrew, thank you so much. And in closing, I'm taking you out for Publix chicken again when we get a chance, because I know you were in love with that Publix chicken.
Do you remember that? Yeah. Now I'm hungry.
When I took the drive for Andrew, I think we went to Publix, or you went to Publix or something like that, and you were just geeking out. I said, I can't believe this chicken is it's not expensive, it's really good. And it came with sides and the Hawaiian rolls, and you were just loving it.
The Hawaiian rolls that did it, buddy. Yeah.
So for a treat, I think I bought you one. I think I think you weren't having dinner, so I think I went out and got you one. If I don't remember correctly there.
We'll have chicken and a bottle of vino.
That sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. I appreciate it. And you please stay safe out there. Mackenzie, Dave, and Brian, thank you for joining us out there. And for everybody who's joined us here at the Legend of the Traveling Tardis, again, please stay home. Please stay safe. We want you to see us at the conventions. We want to see you at the conventions. And though I'll be giving you a hug, I'll probably be wrapped in sanitizer the whole time, and then I'm doing it, or bubble wrap, whatever. But I miss you guys so much, and we'll be seeing you very shortly when we continue to please continue to stay logged on, tune in, and become part of the legend.